Hello. Very good news today. The Supreme Court has dismissed the government's appeal and said that the government does not have a prerogative power to give notice under Article 50. It's of course a landmark judgment. It's 97 pages, so I haven't had time to read through it all, though I do have the summary here with me. Now, of course, it was a majority ruling. It wasn't unanimous, which I think most people had suspected would happen. When it had just entered the Supreme Court, I think a lot of people thought, well, this is such an issue of basic constitutional law that all 11 justices will dismiss the government's appeal. However, it was a majority of 8-3. Now, I'd initially suspected, and other people suspected, it could go up to 4 dissenting judges. However, it is slightly more weighted on the majority side in reality. Now, what that means is what the effect of this judgment is that Parliament will now have a vote on whether to trigger Article 50. And personally, I think it's unlikely that they'll vote against, and I'll go into that at the end. Now, some of the points which I actually made in my Article 50 video explaining the case, and I'll put the link in the description to that, came up in this judgment. In fact, I think all of the points I made, more or less. The issue about the international plane was probably the most important. Now, obviously, government ministers have a prerogative power on the international plane to negotiate treaties, and they can do whatever they want on the international plane, and that's because whatever they do internationally will have no effect in UK law until Parliament has decided to implement that into UK law through an Act of Parliament. And the government, by that reasoning, can't do anything on the international plane that will end up affecting UK citizens' rights, because Parliament has to do that. And so what the justices have said is that it's common ground that leaving the EU or ceasing to be a member of the EU treaties will have huge consequences in UK domestic law. Now, in the dissenting judgment, Lord Carnworth counters that by saying that giving notice under Article 50, obviously in itself, won't change any laws and it won't affect any rights of UK citizens. However, the majority of the justices have come down and said that yes, that's absolutely correct. Merely triggering Article 50 isn't going to affect our rights, it's not going to affect our laws, it's not going to stop the European Communities Act 1972 from applying. Huhowever, in 2 years' time, it will. We'll cease to be a member of the EU, and as a result, a huge amount of our domestic laws, rather, will be affected. And because of that long-term consequence of triggering Article 50 and affecting UK law, Parliament has to be involved in doing that. They also made the point that Parliament has never given any power to the government to cease to be a member of the European Union to trigger Article 50. Obviously, there's nothing about that in the European Communities Act, because Article 50 was part of the Lisbon Treaty in 2008, I believe. And obviously, the European Communities Act was in 1972. But what they've said is in the European Communities Act 1972, there's nothing about it. They've never given any power to the government. And obviously, in the EU Referendum Act 2015, which is a very basic act, it's quite short, Parliament in that act didn't really say anything at all. It didn't say whether the government has any power to give notice under Article 50. So Parliament hasn't given any power to the government to go ahead and do that. So basically, the result of this case is that the basic principles of UK constitutional law have been upheld. Now, this is going to be brought before Parliament, so if you thought the controversy around Article 50 has ended, it's only just started. This is just the end of the legal consequence. The political consequences are now going to kick in. Now, what I suspect will happen is that there'll be campaigns from some political parties and other campaigning organisations to lobby members of Parliament to vote against triggering Article 50, and I suspect that there'll be a sizable number. Who knows? I mean, in December, we saw that 448 MPs voted in favour of a government motion saying that they want to trigger Article 50 in March 2017, and only 75 MPs voted against it. But now that we've had this legal ruling, who knows, many MPs may feel emboldened and they may want to break party whips, and they may want to vote against triggering Article 50. We'll just have to see what happens. But I suspect this is going to be a very contentious political issue. People are going to be lobbying MPs to vote against it. However, do I think in the end that Article 50, triggering Article 50 rather, is going to be voted down? No, I don't. I think MPs will see that there'll be huge political consequences, even though they have the legal authority to do so. They probably don't want to risk, being threatened or, just being involved in a very public quagmire because they voted against triggering Article 50. And I suspect, if Parliament were to do that, people would say, oh, you've gone against the will of the people, and Parliament's being undemocratic. So it's going to be contentious. So watch out for that in the next few days, or few weeks or months rather. It's going to be a mammoth political issue. However, the legal issue is very clearly settled, and it's something that we should celebrate, that for all our faults, we live in a country where an ordinary citizen can take the government to court. In this case, Gina Miller, who I commend massively. She took the government to court and she won, and in doing so she upheld the sovereignty of Parliament, and that's something we should all celebrate today.